Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I have a very interesting topic for you. One that I haven't seen any other content creator touch on actually. When I was doing my last Twilight Princess video, I started to realize something about the presentation of the world, and how I think it is more than just a choice to depict it as edgy and real. When I look at all the browns and desaturated colors, I can't help but to feel that Hyrule is dying. So kick back as I take a deep dive into...
Hold on a second. How can a kingdom be dying? Does Hyrule have a heart, lungs, and all that fun stuff deep below? I'm intrigued as to what you mean exactly by that.
Oh, hey there Adam, I didn't see you come in. And yeah, I'm completely convinced that Hyrule is dying in the game. Not so much in a biological sense, more like it is starting to decay. It actually looks like Ganondorf might have done them a favor by clawing his way back into the world. Considering that Twilight Princess is your favorite game, maybe you would like to join me while I explain the topic more?
I don't know, man. Hyrule dying? Well, it is my favorite game, and you know I can't turn down the opportunity to talk about it. So let's do this. Let's go for a deep dive into why Hyrule is dying.
Well, in that case, you've got to play along with my intro segment. Alright viewers, kick back as we take a deep dive into Twilight Princess lore. I'm Cornelius Belmont.
I'm Hyrule Gamer.
And let's talk about how Hyrule is dying. Thanks for watching the video. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to the channel. I've recently started a Patreon. More on that at the end. A special thanks to these people for letting me use their assets. Spoilers ahead for the following games. Let's get into it. The first thing that we should talk about, I think, is the obvious signs that the world is in decay. Take a look at the ground, the sky, the plants. All of it is faded and desaturated. A far cry from the lush green of the world that we saw just 100 or so years earlier in Ocarina of Time. It really makes you question what is going on, especially since in the adult timeline, Hyrule is as lush and as vibrant as ever.
Well, let's not get too ahead of ourselves in the depth of game lore just yet. Twilight Princess was supposed to be a lot more realistic and mature looking. The developers decided this following the massive amount of backlash from their previous installment, The Wind Waker. That game took on a very cartoon animation style and popped extremely vibrantly. Fans at the time thought this was too childish and wanted something more real. Enter The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess.
I see where you are coming from, Adam. It's undeniable that Wind Waker, for all of its charm and deep story, failed to secure the sales number that Nintendo wanted. Frankly, I was one of those people who wanted a more mature game, and Twilight Princess gave us just that. Perhaps the washed out colors, overuse of bloom, and brown being the new black are just signs of the time. But that doesn't mean that there couldn't be an in-world reason for the change, now does it?
I guess, but I'd also like to bring up that a less vibrant world doesn't necessarily mean the world is dying. If you compare Breath of the Wild to The Wind Waker, for example, it's less vibrant. Not to the same degree, but still less vibrant. Is Breath of the Wild's Hyrule dying? Well, it may already look dead, but my answer would be no.
Alright, I'll give you that. And I don't think that Breath of the Wild Hyrule is dying. Perhaps Hyrule has some weird seasons, or it's just an artistic choice for the game. However, I would like to bring up that we have seen this type of thing in at least one other game. Surely you remember A Link Between Worlds, right? And how the Kingdom of Hyrule was gradually decaying to the point where only monsters could thrive in it, right?
Well yes, that is true, but didn't that happen because Hyrule destroyed its Triforce? It's clear that the Triforce pieces are in possession of Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf. Oh, wait. In Twilight Princess, there comes a point in time where Ganondorf isn't in Hyrule. He is banished to the Twilight Realm. Okay, this changes things. You could be onto something here.
Right, the sages failed to execute him, and sent him and his Triforce piece to another dimension. though they didn't really have much of a choice. So with that being said, let's get into the consequences of sending him to the Twilight Realm. With Ganondorf banished to another dimension, his piece of the Triforce was out of play in Hyrule. If you would you like to talk about the three golden goddesses and what they did to actually create the world?
Oh boy, deep Zelda lore. Let me explain. Following the creation of Hyrule, a sacred relic was left behind by the golden goddesses that created the very land. Equal contributions from Din, Nehru, and Furore, the goddesses of power, wisdom, and courage. Each goddess corresponds with a piece of the Triforce that they left behind. There are many different depictions, names, and stories about this relic, but no matter how you view it, the Triforce is the utmost important relic in the Legend of Zelda. In Ocarina of Time, we actually get a cutscene depicting the creation of Hyrule, and as a result, the Triforce. Din carved and moulded out the beautiful landscapes of the world. Nehru spread her wisdom across the land and gave the spirit of law to the world. Furore, with her rich soul, brought all life forms to the world. After this was done, they left behind a product, or symbol of their divine power and creation. The Triforce. 3 equal parts, the Triforce of power, the Triforce of wisdom, and the Triforce of courage.
Din's power is what is most important here. As we see in Hyrule, the Triforce is a stabilizing force in the world, and without it, things fall apart. If Din's power was the part of the Triforce that fashioned the world from chaos, then without it around, the world may gradually decay back to that chaos. This decay would be subtle, and we see that Hyrule fell over the course of centuries, maybe even 1,000 years. Since Ganondorf's banishment, it's been 100 or so years, and so I think it is a very real possibility that the land is showing early signs of decay.
Well, there are still 2 other pieces of the Triforce in play there, that and Hyrule destroyed theirs. That definitely has to be considered here, though we don't know exactly how synonymous Hyrule is with Hyrule, given their Triforce could be extremely different. We simply don't know that.
I suppose that is fair. We don't know how Hyrule's Triforce stabilizes their world, merely that without it, their world fell into decay. That being said, we do know that the Triforce itself grants wishes and manipulates the world. It works reality for the user of it. All that aside, it seems feasible that removing part of the stabilizing force of the world could lead to decay. Not a full-on catastrophe, more like the wilting of a plant. I think all of these shades of brown and the gloom in Twilight Princess resembles that, don't you?
Yes, I do think they resemble that. However, I'd like to bring up the fact that for a very long time, the Triforce resided in other realms. The Silent Realm and Sacred Realm. Even in the Wind Wakers and A Link to the Past backstories, we learn that Ganondorf had the Triforce of Power the entire time whilst in another realm, with no signs of decay. How would we explain that?
That is a very good point. My conclusion though is that the Sacred Realm, despite being called a realm, is actually still part of the world of Hyrule. Or at least, not completely detached. These other places, Hyrule, the Twilight Realm, maybe even Termina if it is real, they may exist completely independent of Hyrule. We at a minimum know that Hyrule was. In short, while the Triforce is in the Sacred Realm, even a corrupted one after Ganon had been sealed in it, it still continues to exist in Hyrule and stabilize the world. I'm arguing that the Twilight Realm is completely disconnected. And so, when Ganondorf was there with the Triforce of Power, it too was cut off, and thus Hyrule began to wilt.
Okay, that's fair enough, and could be a reasonable explanation. Now, something else we should definitely discuss is that we know very little about the Twilight Realm, and should get some facts about it established.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, shall we? Why don't you start us off by giving us some details about this world?
This shadowy plane of existence is in more than high contrast to Hyrule. It's not just dark against light, this is structurally a very different place. The Twilight Realm is a parallel realm to Hyrule. It's made up of floating islands, dark clouds, a dim light, and of course, the life forms here, the Twilight residents and the Twilight wildlife such as Shadow Kargarok. History-wise, this realm goes back to when the interlopers were banished from Hyrule due to trying to invade the Sacred Realm and steal the Triforce. Their punishment was banishment to here. Many years later, and the actual Twilight race was born. Well, descended from the original interlopers who were banished here.
I think it is very telling that we never see any stable landmasses in the Twilight realm. It's all floating rocks with some structures built on them. There is a light, but not what I would consider a sun. And I'm hesitant to say that it has a day cycle. Simply put, the Twilight realm, despite having the twilight in it, looks like a very dead place to me.
Yes, exactly. That is a pretty good way to put it. But what does that have to do with the Triforce exactly?
To me, it seems like the Twilight realm is devoid of the blessing of the goddesses. Perhaps it even depicts what things were like when they first appeared, what they crafted Hyrule from using their untold power. With Ganondorf existing there with the Triforce of power for 100 or so years, perhaps he tried to manipulate their land, or just continue to hoard his power to himself. I find it more interesting that if the Twilight realm is completely separated from Hyrule, and doesn't reap any of the goddess's blessings, that Midna at the end chose to sever the connection to Hyrule.
I'm sure Midna had her reasons for doing that. We can't know for sure, but I can offer my own personal speculation. I believe a big reason for Midna doing that was to avoid any further potential harm and distress to Hyrule. By the end of Twilight Princess, Midna can see how the realm affected Hyrule and its people, and whilst it's now going to be hers, and rightfully hers by the way, she just doesn't want to take the chance of anything like what happened happening again. That's my take there. But more importantly, I'd like to ask you, is there any evidence to support any actual decay of the land, besides the colouring?
There is a little that I found. I'll admit that it is weak, but we can go over it. One of them is your favorite NPC in the game, I believe. There are two NPCs that I have found that provide some evidence that the land is entering a state of decay. The first of which is Agatha, the bug-catching girl in the game. You know, she is obsessed with bugs, and there is a side quest to collect 24 golden bugs throughout the game. Unfortunately, the nature of these golden bugs is not explained. It could be that she is trying to collect them in order to secure their survival, but she also seems to be a little on the eccentric side. She is one of the few people in the game who isn't afraid of Wolf Link after all.
I see. That is decent evidence to suggest, but it isn't exactly answering the question. Is there perhaps anything to build on this and strengthen the evidence? What about Henna, who runs her own fishing hole?
Henna is a different story. Much like her grandfather, she runs the fishing pond, and will even join you as a guide if you pay her enough. What's interesting though is that despite having books talking about the Hylian Loch, a recurring fish in the series, she will admit to never having seen one before. Considering that the fish could be caught in Ocarina of Time in her family's fishing pond, that could imply that the fish has become more rare. It's not exactly strong evidence that the land is dying, but I did find out that in the adult timeline, the Hylian Loch is shown to be alive in Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, though the games only depict them in paintings.
For me personally, that is similar in terms of strength to the Agatha evidence. It works and could make sense, but isn't proving the theory itself. I love fish, fishing and aquatic life in general, and really like this point. However, it still needs more on top of it.
The only other things that I have found are two locations in the game that hint at desertion. The Hidden Village, also known as the Bygone Village, and the Snow Peak Ruins. The Hidden Village has an uncanny resemblance to that of a Midwestern ghost town. The type of place depicted after the gold from the mountain has dried up. Snow Peak Ruins is a fortress or mansion that is abandoned for unknown reasons. It could be that the climate in both areas became untenable for the population due to the land's decay.
Now, these are a lot more solid pieces of evidence in my opinion. They are clear-cut and outright evidence of decline. The Hidden Village is clearly falling to pieces and has been neglected for a long time. The Snow Peak Ruins, whilst very far away and difficult to reach, they've also begun to fall to pieces. One is fair enough, could be a coincidence, but both? it certainly shows major signs of decline. Then add in the smaller details that we already went over. Could this be adding up?
It's only been 100 or so years, and unlike Lowroll where the entire Triforce was destroyed, a single missing piece would probably result in an even slower rate of decay. Whatever wilting was happening, though, would ultimately be fixed when the Triforce of Power returned alongside Ganondorf. With the Twilight invasion, Ganondorf had his way back from the Twilight Realm to Hyrule. With him in possession of the Triforce of Power, he would have inadvertently brought back that stabilizing force to the land.
Interesting point to bring up. Well, you know Hyrule Castle and Castle Town? They both appear as though the full Triforce does exist in the land. How would you explain that?
Indeed they do, Adam. However, this could just be propaganda. If the royal family secures its supremacy by having the relic in their possession, then they probably don't want it to be known that a piece is missing. They especially wouldn't want it to be known that said piece is in the hands of the man who they had a war with and threw into the Twilight Realm. Considering how close they were to losing it had it not been for a young hero of time showing up with information and the Triforce of Courage bound to him, I imagine they would have kept those secrets close to their chest.
Most definitely. I am actually a big believer in the Hyrulean royal family having many secrets. That's a rabbit hole to dive into another day, but the point here is that I totally think they could and would conceal that sort of knowledge.
Hyrulean politics aside, if the land was decaying and Ganondorf returned, that decay would have ended. If we look forward on the timeline a couple hundred years, to the events of Four Swords Adventure, the world seems to be thriving once again, even the Gerudo.
Four Swords Adventures is an interesting point in this theory. The world does indeed appear to be thriving again. Perhaps they wouldn't have realised that the land was entering a state of decline, and is more of a gradual process.
I think what is most ironic here is that if this theory is true, Ganondorf would have had the means of doing more damage to Hyrule in his exile than returning to conquer it. Had he just stayed in the Twilight Realm, the land may have just rotted away, though perhaps not to the extent that we see in Lowroll.
Maybe. Who knows? I think he maybe did just want to slaughter the Kingdom of Hyrule.
Well, thank you for joining me, Adam. This has been an interesting topic to think about, but with Tears of the Kingdom coming out in just a few months, I should probably shift more into Breath of the Wild content.
Of course, it has been a blast joining you here today, and hey, sometime soon you should hop on a video over on my channel.
I would love to. It would be an honor. For now though, let's wrap this up. Would you like to do the closing phrase of my show?
Of course, I'd be honoured.
Well, this has been Cornelius Belmont.
And this has been Hyrule Gamer. May the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.
Well guys, what did you think of the show? Is Hyrule really dying? Or is all the overuse of Bloom and Brown just how things were in 2006? If so, do you think that there are at least some consequences for part of the Triforce being stuck in the Twilight Realm? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I need to give a really big thank you to Hyrule Gamer for joining me today. I'll link to his channel in the description of course, though I bet you are already subscribed there. As a reminder, this channel is supported by Patreon. If you are in a position to help out and want direct input on topics, or to help me research on our patron-exclusive Discord server, consider joining. Every little bit counts, especially early on, as this channel isn't eligible to be monetized until I have at least 1,000 subscribers. Well, I'm off to work on next week's Judgment Time. Thank you for joining us. This has been Cornelius Belmont, signing off.